Hi, I'm Ashley Cartagena, and this is my audience. This is my dad, Efren, my sister, Destiny, my mom, Sandra, my best friend, Marilyn, my best friend, Amy, and my brother, Marco. El patriotismo recuerda la ofrenda, y en esto no hay facilidad, o todo o nada. Patriotism requires an offering, and in this there is no partiality. It's all or nothing. This is just one of the great inspirational messages Pedro Albizu Campos had to offer during his lifetime. Albizu Campos was one of the most notable figures in Puerto Rican history. A great speaker, an activist, a Puerto Rican nationalist, he'd hold widely attended rallies in which he would argue for Puerto Rico's independence and the unjust acquisition of Puerto Rico by the United States. Well educated, especially in law, Albizu Campos would make of legal reasons to support his stances. When the U.S. government wouldn't see the light and made efforts to muzzle him and other nationalists, words would no longer be enough. Today, I will share with you the critical and inspirational role Pedro Albizu Campos would take in the fight for the island's freedom, as he openly criticized and exposed the experimentation and murder of the Puerto Rican people by U.S. institutions. He advocated for better labor conditions for Puerto Rican citizens and led an uprising with the Nationalist Party against the U.S. occupation. I want to begin by discussing Albizu Campos' public exposure of the Rockefeller Anemia Institute. Pedro Albizu Campos made a mission to expose the corrupt and racist nature of the American institutions. One such institution was the Rockefeller Anemia Commission. A doctor from the Rockefeller Commission, Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, would establish the research laboratory in San Juan Presbyterian Hospital. In his book, War Against All Puerto Ricans and Revolution and Terror in America's Colony, author Nelson Dennis describes how the doctor would compose a drunken note to one of his peers. In this note, Rhodes would refer to Puerto Ricans as the dirtiest, laziest, most degenerate, and thievish race of men to ever inhabit this sphere, and that would continue on to claim that he had done the best to further the process of their extermination by killing off 8 and transplanting cancer into several more. In his opinion, all doctors enjoy the abusive torture of Puerto Rican patients. Historian Susan E. Lederer, in her book American Literacy History, would note how the letter was soon found and entered to the possession of Pedro Albizu Campos. He would publicize it, calling Rhodes' plot to exterminate the Puerto Rican people who entered his care. The publication of the letter would lead to his redistribution and publication in more notable magazines and public news sources such as Time magazine. It would also lead to an investigation into the letter's contents, though no evidence could be found that the doctor's patients died under suspicious circumstances or abuse. Remember, 8 out of the 13 patients at the hospital were under his care. While Rhodes was never punished or found guilty of any of his claims within the letter, Albizu Campos was successful in exposing the systematic racism in place against the Puerto Rican people. A year after those events in 1934, Albizu Campos would play an essential role fight for proper wages for Puerto Rican laborers. The sugarcane strike of 1934 was one of Albizu Campos' most notable accomplishments. Sugarcane workers had undergone a severe drop in wages, going from 75 cents for a 12-hour workday to 45 cents over the course of 5 years. The island and its workers were starving and poverty was prevalent. Industrial laborers were growing angry and strikes and protests happening at an increasing rate throughout 1933. The strike not only addressed the industries that had wronged them, but labor leaders who would sign island-wide labor agreements without discussing the terms with the laborers. The agreements the labor leaders signed did nothing to help the laborers or increase wages, causing them to look for other leadership for aid. Laborers would reach out to Albizu Campos, asking him to speak for the people. The next day, he gave a speech to 6,000 Puerto Ricans for hours in the pouring rain. The people were so inspired by his words that they would ask him to lead them through a strike. Albizu Campos would then form a workers' association for Puerto Rico with the sugarcane laborers. He'd represent them as they bartered with the sugar corporations, and the government would for proper wages and working conditions. Colonel E. Francis Riggs, who was then the police chief for Puerto Rico and the son of the president for the Riggs National Bank, was in interest of putting an end to the strike. Riggs tried to bribe Albizu Campos to put an end to the strike by offering a hefty donation to the Nationalist Party, a seat on the Senate, and a position as the Puerto Rican governor within the next decade. Albizu Campos refused to be bought off. A month later, the strike was settled, and the workers were successful in raising their wages to more than double the current rate. With Campos' aid, the strike was a success. Albizu Campos' success with the sugarcane strikers and his refusal to stand down to, however, would attract the attention of the U.S. government, who sought to put an end to the Nationalist Party. Years after the strike and the arrest, members of the Nationalist Party, including Albizu Campos, underwent heavy surveillance by the FBI agents and the government. In 1948, a gag law was passed, allowing governments such as police officers and the FBI to detain Puerto Ricans and their homes. Any sign of Puerto Rican nationalism or independence could warrant an arrest under this law. As tension rose, the Nationalist Party and those affiliated with the party were stopped and interrogated by the police and FBI. Finally, in October of 1950, as leaders of the members of the party were ordered to be arrested or be killed if they resisted, Albizu Campos had enough. He would contact other members of the Nationalist Party, and the Puerto Rican Revolution would begin. In his essay about major figures during the movement for Puerto Rico's independence, Gerald Mayer breaks down the revolution. On October 29th, hundreds of the Nationalist members armed themselves in Puerto Rican cities. On the 30th to the 31st, a series of attempted revolts took place, many of them largely foiled due to leaked information. On November 1st, 2 nationalists attacked the Blair House in Washington, D.C. and attempted to assassinate the president. 27 had been killed, 1,000 suspected nationalists and leftists were arrested by police. Albizu Campos was arrested once more and sentenced to 80 years in prison. While the revolution and the revolts had been largely unsuccessful and disorganized, they were successful in calling attention to Puerto Rico, the necessity for the island's independence, and the reality of the U.S. occupation. Despite the attempted suppression by the U.S. government to avoid anarchy and rebellion, the gag order and continuous suffocating control by the government had caused the Nationalist Party and Albizu Campos to say, enough is enough, no más. In conclusion, Albizu Campos was one of the most influential figures in the movement for Puerto Rican independence. He exposed the systematic racism and the mistreatment of the Puerto Rican people by U.S. institutions. He fought for the rights for hard-working laborers who sought better wages and working conditions, and took up arms in revolution against government as they tried to suppress the Nationalist Party and the Puerto Rican people as a result. In the fight for freedom and independence, for Pedro Albizu Campos, it was truly all or nothing. Thank you.
2 seconds.